Expressing Gender, the effect of situational comfort on ing pronunciation in transgender speech. So what is translinguistics? Well, it examines how transgender individuals navigate, modify, and use their speech in accordance with their gender identity. It is also a relatively new and constantly evolving field, and I use the term new here to signify that although there's a long-standing presence of transgender individuals and their linguistic identities, it is only recently that these topics have gained their deserved attention within research. But I think the best way to sum up what translinguistics is a quote from translinguist Lal Zemin. They say, translinguistics is not just about centering trans speakers, nor only about creating a space for more trans people to become linguists. It is about channeling the strength, creativity, beauty, and vitality of trans experience into new ways of being a linguist that are as yet unknown. First, let's look at the thesis roadmap, as this will help guide us through the presentation. I'll start with the background section, where I review relevant literature within the field and define ing variation and its social perception. We'll then look at the methodology section, where I detail the approaches used within this study. I'll cover participant selection, interview setting, and data processing. Then the data analysis, where I present an analysis of speech data and link findings to participants' comfort levels in various social settings. Finally, there will be discussion and conclusion, where I discuss the results and their implications, and compare my findings to previous studies. I'll then identify areas for improvement and suggest directions for further research. Now on to ing variation. Ing is a variable that manifests in two forms: the standard variant, ing, as in the word running, and the vernacular variant, in, as in the word runnin. From research like Fisher 1958, Labov 2001, and Tagliamonte 2004, it is shown to be gendered, meaning that women are more likely to use the standard variant, ing, whereas men are more likely to use the vernacular variant, in. Here's an example of one of my participants producing both variations.
In my relationships that I was missing, and I was going around and around and around.
For more background, I'll be describing the study that was the inspiration for this research. Gratton 2016, Resisting the Gender Binary, the Use of ing in the Construction of Non-Binary Transgender Identities. Gratton investigates the use of the ing variable among 8 non-binary individuals. Gratton also uses a sociolinguistic interview in 2 different settings, a queer-friendly setting, like the participant's home, and a non-queer-friendly setting, like a coffee shop or a public place. Gratton found that ing variation is a protective mechanism to avoid misgendering, and also revealed that participants produced their preferred ing variants at comparably high rates. As we can see here with Gratton's participant Flynn, who was assigned female at birth, is using the canonical male variant at 80% in a non-queer-friendly setting, whereas Casey, who was assigned male at birth, is using the feminine variant at around 90% in a public setting. Moving forward to the methodology section, I will discuss the demographics and selection criteria for my participants. Throughout this research, the participants have been referred to by their self-chosen pseudonyms, Percy and Lily, for anonymization. They are binary identifying transgender individuals who are both in their early 20s and speakers of Michigan English. It is also important to note that they share a pre-existing close relationship with me, and this was done to control for situational comfort. My first participant is Percy, whose pronouns are he, him, and was self-reported assigned female at birth. My second participant is Lily, whose pronouns are she, her, and was self-reported assigned male at birth. To gather speech data, I conducted 2 sociolinguistic interviews with each participant. The first interview is the queer-friendly or private setting interview, which was held at the participant's home. The second is the non-queer-friendly or public setting, which, in the case for both participants, was held at a coffee shop that they had never been to before. Each interview was just over an hour long and draws from Labov's 1985 Field Methods on the Project of Linguistic Change and Variation. Labov uses conversation modules or groups of questions in sociolinguistic interviews to elicit vernacular speech and narratives. I memorized these questions to mitigate the effects of the observer's paradox during the interviews. Some examples of the questions I created were: can you share a moment when you felt particularly affirmed in your gender? What was your experience with discovering your gender identity? Or, have you ever had your heart broken? After each interview, the participants filled out a post-interview questionnaire asking questions regarding their gender identity, voice, and situational comfort. Finally, for my methodology section, I will walk through my transcription process, where I employed Google's automated speech recognition software within the MI Diaries backend for the initial transcription. Then I hand-corrected and time-aligned the transcriptions for better accuracy. After the transcriptions were corrected, I utilized the Montreal Forced Aligner to automate the alignment of the text to audio so that I could code pronunciations manually using a prot script. Finally, the data was organized into a spreadsheet. Here you can see the hand correction and time aligning of the transcripts. Next is data analysis. From the 4 interviews, 789 tokens of ing were analyzed. If we first look at Percy's data, we can see that in the public or non-queer friendly setting, he used the canonically masculine in variant at a rate of 22%, whereas in private that dropped to only 7%, showing that he felt much more comfortable to be free in his variation. Now for Lily's rate of the more feminine ing variant in public, it was at 96%, which dropped to only 74% in private, showing again that she was very comfortable in the private setting, and she felt safe to use her sex-assigned at birth's preferred variant. Now analyzing the data from the participants' post-interview questionnaires, we see that after the public interview, Percy rated his situational comfort at an 8 out of 10, and Lily rated hers at a 7 out of 10, compared to the private setting where both participants rated their situational comfort at a 10. This shows that the lower situational comfort in non-queer friendly settings aligns with increased use of their gender's preferred variant. So what have we found? Well, Percy has a 15% shift towards the more masculine variant in public setting, and Lily has a 22% shift towards the more feminine variant in the public setting, indicating that both participants adjusted their ing variant usage based on the comfort of their environment. This mirrors the findings of Gratton 2016. Also, that the usage of ing variation serves as a tool to avoid being misgendered, or simply to navigate public spaces with less friction. As for limitations, there were a few. Firstly is the small pool of participants. There were only 2, and they were both from Michigan, which this could potentially affect the generalizability of findings to broader transgender communities. And as previously mentioned, there's an existing relationship between the participants and myself, and that may have increased their comfort in both settings. Lastly is the choice of the non-queer friendly setting. I chose a coffee shop, which may not have been the best representation of the less inclusive environment that I was aiming for, as coffee shops are usually perceived as inclusive and welcoming, so that for further research, more rigorous criteria for defining these non-queer friendly spaces should be applied. For future research, I feel that it is important to have a more varied background for participants, whether this be age, dialect, geographic location, or even transitioning and non-transitioning. Also, conducting a longitudinal study to see whether ing variation is stable in transgender individuals or not. Another area of work is looking into the way that linguistic variation can be used for enhancing voice training techniques, especially for people who struggle with gender dysphoria. Further explorations of linguistic variations across different queer cultures and communities could be greatly insightful too. These could be gay, lesbian, asexual communities, or even the drag and burlesque scene, as one of my participants mentioned that they feel that their speech has been drastically affected by those communities. And finally, are these gendered perceptions unique to linguistic stereotypes like ing, or do we also find them in markers and indicators? In conclusion, I've found that situational comfort largely affects the variation of ing production in binary identifying transgender individuals, with transgender men leaning towards the more canonically masculine in variant in non-queer friendly settings, and transgender women adopting the more feminine ing variant in these less inclusive spaces. My work also resonates with the aforementioned studies like Gratton 2016 and Rechsteiner and Sneller 2023. So, although the scope of this study may have been limited to the small participant pool, I feel that this research is a wonderful step for moving forward to investigating queer linguistic variation in more depth. Please feel free to ask any questions you may have.